Hey everyone, my name is Maria del Mar Herrero and this is my research case study presentation. For the first case we're going to discuss, it's going to be the New York Times versus L.B. Sullivan. The parties involved in this case, like I said, are the New York Times and L.B. Sullivan. What are the facts that led to their dispute? Is that the New York Times published an ad that stated that Martin Luther King Jr.'s arrest for perjury in Alabama was part of a campaign to destroy what he was doing to integrate public facilities and encourage black votes. That was when the respondent filed a libel action against the newspaper because he said the allegations were defaming him personally. Why did Sullivan feel his reputation was damaged by the New York Times publication? During that publication, the New York Times actually talked about some statements that were about police action that was directed to students that participated in a civil rights demonstration. And the respondent, J.B. Sullivan, felt that it was referring to him because at that time he was the one responsible for the supervision of the police department. What are the elements of defamation? And since Sullivan was a public official, what did the plaintiff have to prove in this case? So first, the definition of defamation is the general term for a legal claim involving injury to one's reputation caused by a false statement of fact. There's two kinds of defamation. The first one would be libel, which is defamation written or fixed form. And then the second one is slander, which is spoken defamation. For this case, since Sullivan was a public official, the plaintiff had to prove that the defendant knew that the statement was false or reckless when deciding to publish the information without investigating if it was accurate. What was the U.S. Supreme Court's decision and why did it make that decision? When the case went to the Supreme Court, they went in favor to the New York Times. The reason they went in favor of the New York Times was because in order to prove libel, Sullivan would have to prove that the newspaper had acted with actual malice and that they had knowledge that it was false or disregarded the truth. It is very important to understand that for these cases of defamation, when you actually go through them, you have to actually prove that the person that supposedly is defaming you is doing this with actual malice. You can't prove that, then your case is definitely going to fall. And that's what happened with Sullivan. He didn't have actual proof or any proof that would stay with him, stating that the New York Times had done this on purpose and it was all directed to him. So that's why definitely the Supreme Court went in favor of the New York Times. The second case we're going to talk about, it's going to be Gertz versus Welsh. In this case, who are the parties to the case, and was the petitioner a private person or public figure? So the parties in this case were Gertz versus Welsh, and the petitioner was a private person, which this was an actual one of the questions that they had, because would a private person have the same constitutional rights than a public figure, and how would that change and vary? So, and if the person at that moment, what makes him a public figure or a public person? So that was definitely one of the big things with this case. But eventually they decided like he would be as a private person. What were the alleged defamatory statements about Gertz in the American Opinion article? The article accused Gertz of being the one in charge of a frame-up that brought a suit against local police officer that had killed a child. It stated that he had a criminal record, and the principal issue as well was if a person that is not a public official or a public figure can claim a constitutional privilege against liability for the statements. What was done to confirm the accuracy of these allegations against Gertz? So they definitely had to do a lot of research for this case, because definitely they first have to check that all of the accusations that they have been doing and that were stated in this case were definitely true. But apparently there was a multiple inaccuracies, and there was an implication of a criminal record, which definitely at the end turned to be false as well. There was no evidence that he or the organization had been part of those demonstrations in 1968. So at the end, they didn't have anything to be able to back up what they were saying. So they just had to read everything and go through everything again to make sure that this was real And at the end, there was too many inaccuracies. How do you think these allegations affected Gert's reputation? I think it affected his credibility. It didn't really have any base, any information that was telling really the truth. He didn't have any credible sources. So at the end, actually, I think it hurted him because eventually he would have been seen as a not credible source. And when you are any person, actually, I think you want to be someone credible. You want people to respect you. And I think at this point, he definitely lost that. What would you have done differently than Welch to avoid the lawsuit? Again, basic thing, verify sources. When you are working in the industry as a reporter, as a journalist, as a attorney, as a anything, you have to verify your sources. You have to make sure that the information you're giving out to your public, it's real and you have information to back it up. You cannot say something and not have credible sources. So for me, what would I have been done? I would verify my sources' credibility. Make sure that whatever I'm talking about, I have a source that's going to back me up and be like, okay, this is what I have, and this is what I'm talking about, and this is why. Florida's defamation law. So in Florida, the elements of defamation are that if the defendant published a false statement about the plaintiff to a third party and the falsity of the statement caused injury to the plaintiff. And lastly, we have how can you relate what you learned from the Sullivan and Gertz case to your future work in the communications industry? I think it's basic. You need to have credible sources. You need to make sure that whenever you're giving information out, even if you're a reporter, a journalist, a blogger, anyone, as a public figure and you're putting your information in a newspaper, in internet nowadays, in a magazine, anywhere, you have to have credibility. People are going to reach you and you want to make sure that when they reach you, they're like, I'm going to read that person and I'm going to get that information from there because they're a credible source, because I know that what they're saying has a backup. And that's for me is the most important thing. Always, 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 always make sure that your work has a source, that you're credible, and that the information you're giving is what you have to give out. Here are my references for the pictures as well as for the text that we have, and I thank you for watching.